Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Keisha Ducree, and if you haven't been here before, hello. Nice to see you, and if you have, welcome back. Again, I'm so happy because I have more subscribers. So thank you for subscribe, and if you haven't, please subscribe before you leave. And I love your comments. Comments are great. I had planned to create a playlist about the bopping that I've been doing, 4 countries, 3 months. But I wanted to take this opportunity off of my regularly scheduled playlist to commemorate March 10th. March 10th is the unofficial holiday for Harriet Tubman. She died March 10th. The date of her birth is not sure. We're not even really sure about the year. And so organizers, things like Girl Trek, have organized a rally around March 10th, which works really well because we're just the second week or so into Women's History Month, coming off of the Tales of Black History Month. So I wanted to acknowledge that and commemorate that. As a Black Feminist Geography scholar, I have written a chapter about Harriet Tubman and what I call her Black Feminist Spatial Imagination. And so I thought I would go in the Wayback Machine and create this kind of forward to a talk that I gave a couple of years ago. And the title of that talk was Harriet Tubman is Dope. So I'm going to attach that talk as a part of a whole panel, and I'm the first person on it. But I want you to take a look at that talk, and I think I'm going to do a follow-up talking about what Harriet Tubman, as an abolitionist, would think about the world today. Literally, what's going on in the last month or so under the current administration. What would Tubman's abolitionist cause be? And I wrote about that, and I want to talk about that as well. But for now, I am going to create a link or attach a clip of that talk, Harriet Tubman is Dope, in honor of Harriet Tubman Day, March 10th. And I will probably do a follow-up video to talk about what would Harriet Tubman do and what would constitute a sanctuary city or a sanctuary space for Tubman. Excited about that.
Sustainably within ecosystems. So we understand this webinar series and today's webinar itself as a part of that process. It is a great privilege for us to host today's webinar, to have these speakers who are all spectacular. And I will start by introducing our first speaker and then come in with the next ones and introduce each of them when it's their time to speak. So our first panelist today is Dr. Keisha Ducree. She's the inaugural Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and former chair and associate professor in African American Studies in the College of Arts and Sciences at Syracuse University. She's authored works on environmental justice, feminism, and community-based research, including the 2012 book, A Place We Call Home, Gender, Race, and Justice in Syracuse, and in 2016, a co-edited volume entitled Addressing Environmental and Food Justice Toward Dismantling the School-to-Prison Pipeline, Poisoning and Imprisoning Youth. Her most recent scholarship on this subject has just been published in the 2018 special edition of Environmental Sociology, entitled The Black Feminist Spatial Imagination and an Intersectional Environmental Justice. She's also curated photography exhibitions based on her community-based arts research, known as Photo Voice, in New York, California, and Trinidad and Tobago. In 2011, she was Fulbright Fellow at the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the University of West Indies, St. Augustine. She's been a committed advocate for environmental justice for over 2 decades. Her first foray in environmental activism was as a toxics campaigner for Greenpeace USA in the 1990s. She combines her experiences on the front lines of the environmental justice movement and academic training in geography and demography for a unique and gendered perspective on economic and environmental inequality. Her latest writing project is the development of a book manuscript that expands upon her theoretical perspectives on the Black feminist spatial imagination featuring case studies of the lives and influences of 3 women of the African diaspora, Harriet Tubman, Wangari Maathai, and Jamaica Kincaid. And that is where she will be starting us off. So it is with great excitement that I turn to you.
Thank you very much, Carol. And thank you to all who have organized this symposium tonight. And so I am going to try to take all my thoughts and present them in 10 minutes and hopefully leave you with a lot of questions afterwards. So the title of my talk is Harriet Tubman is Dope. And she is dope. She really is. But the problem is the way that the mainstream imagination has about Harriet Tubman. I should say that yesterday was Harriet Tubman Day. She died March 10th. And so the way that we think about Tubman is we think about her as Moses or conductor of the Underground Railroad. But I'm here to tell you that this conceptualization that I have that I've been using called the Black Feminist Spatial Imagination explains why Harriet Tubman is not only dope for that, but her mastery of space prepared her to be able to do what she did to free 300 formerly enslaved people, mostly her relatives. And we also need to understand that she's dope for the work that she's not as recognized for in terms of being a spy involved in the largest raid during the Civil War, as well as her work in abolitionism and support of others, as well as in her final years establishing a space for orphans and for Black elderly in Auburn, New York. So that's why she's dope. So I'm going to talk about the Underground Railroad piece, but there's so much more to this. And the key to this in the book manuscript that was alluded to is I have needed to create a conceptualization for what I saw in my photo voice research with women in the Syracuse, Black mothers in south side of Syracuse, an impoverished area right next to Syracuse University, and with women who lived in stigmatized neighborhoods around the capital city, Port of Spain, and Trinidad and Tobago. I noticed with my research and with these particular women and mothers that they understood environmental risk to be much broader than anything that was ecological, that their risk, what they saw as ecological risk, had to do with the threat of violence, the site of past violence due to drug trafficking or gang activity. And so they have a very broader understanding of what environment is and what risk is. And so coming through that research, what was available to me to explain that wasn't enough, because it was something about being a woman and it was something about being African American, African descended, that needed to explain what was going on and how they understood and managed risk in their communities. For the rest of us, those who are able, if they live in a risky environment, they move. But those who are stuck in those spaces have to find unique strategies to mitigate those risks. And that's what I ended up calling the Black Feminist Spatial Imagination. And it's really this idea that having this intersectional position, having the challenges of patriarchy and having the challenges of racism requires a hypervigilance and a watchfulness when Black women move through space, right? And so Harriet Tubman, I think, is really iconic when it comes to the idea of a Black woman being hypervigilant and watchful and moving through space. In her, again, her mastery of space is what makes her so dope. So I want to talk about the ways in which her mastery of space, those spaces, the command of her spaces, make sense in this idea of the Black feminist spatial imagination. The first is her understanding of plantation landscapes. She has a unique location in her personal history and her biography that made it possible for her to have the agency and the courage and the will to run away and to return. for others. There's also the idea of fugitive landscapes in her work on fugitive landscapes. So she settles in Auburn, New York, and she settles at the behest of the Seward family. But it is something about the actual position of Auburn, New York, I think it is important. The third thing about her mastery of space and why she's so dope is that she has been in recent literature, particularly by Dorceta Taylor, she has been placed among the canon of environmental philosophers like Thoreau and Muir. And Dorceta Taylor has an excellent chapter called Harriet in the Wilds that really explains her mastery and understanding of nature and ecology. She understands the medicinal herbs and plants, things that we haven't really talked about as her being sitting beside this canon of environmental philosophers. Then, if time allows, I'll know, Melissa tells me, there's also this ability of this mastery of space in her role as a spy. When she worked for the government in the Civil War, and her successful spy craft in the Combahee River raid. And we know the Combahee River because of its significance in the establishment of Black feminist genealogy with the Combahee River collective statement and Barbara Smith and others. And then finally, in her final years, she's able to provide space for others. As I said before, she moves to Auburn, she settles there, and she takes her capital. She's well known. She takes her capital and she decides to fundraise and take charitable donations to build a home for the aged and for Black orphans. So she never stops, and she's always working, and it's all about her command and mastery and strategy of space. So let me go back to plantation landscapes really quickly. One of the things that people don't know, 4 minutes left, I'm glad I gave it all to you. So if you have a question, you can ask me about plantation spaces, fugitive landscapes, her environmental philosophy, spycraft in the Combahee River raid, as well as her final establishment of these homes. So what people don't realize is that Harriet Tubman was uniquely situated to run away because of her mastery of plantation landscapes. Her and her father were leased out to other families and other farms in Dorchester, Maryland. So she did not have the same geographical understanding as an enslaved person who was not leased and never left the plantation grounds. Because her father and they were moving to different places, she had a larger geographical map and understood Dorchester, Maryland better than the average enslaved person. Her father was into timber industry, and so he taught her this part of the environmental philosopher that Dorceta talks about. He taught her about the plants and the woods and reverence for nature. She understood how to move through the woods and space and felt quite comfortable there. So these types of things that she was primed for made it possible for her to attempt to escape with her brothers the first time. They were captured, but then she did it again on her own herself. And as we know, as the story is told, she goes back multiple times until she is able to liberate 300 enslaved people. I also want to take this time to talk about the fugitive landscape. So again, she settles in Auburn, New York. And while she settles there because of the generosity of the Sewards, she also settles there. Now that I look at it, it's not that far from Canada. And so after the Fugitive Slave Act, she knew that it was dangerous for her to be there. So she took her parents and herself, and they went to St. Catharines in Ontario, Canada, not very far. So now we have Harriet not only dominating and mastery of of space from the south, because Maryland is south, to the north, we have her mastery and domination over transnational boundaries, right? And she's able to cross to Canada and to the New York and the US in ways to make herself safe and her others in her care safe. And again, environmental philosophy, we can definitely talk about that and what she knew about the woods and her experiences as a healer. And then the interesting thing about the Combahee River raid is while she was instrumental in the most successful raid in the Civil War, as many people will talk about when it comes to Black feminism and Black feminist epistemology, her value was always threatened. She fought after the war to get her pension like other former soldiers that the United States would not offer her. When they eventually did give her pension, what she was owed for her work during the war, it was significantly less than other soldiers. So we can talk about Harriet in terms of the devaluing of Black women in the capitalist system. And then again, finally, the idea of space. On her grounds in Auburn, New York, I invite you all to come visit. It has now been declared a national historic site. She has the remains, it burned down. She has the remains of the aged home where she helped before there was Medicare, Medicaid. She saw fit to protect the most vulnerable in Black society, which were children without parents, as well as the aged. So again, Harriet is dope.